Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. My name is Ellen Belding, and I'm the owner of SRS. SRS is a 100% woman-owned business. We are union, and we perform concrete and masonry work. Last year, I had 30 people on my payroll. I provide opportunities to people that maybe others would not. We had women apprentices, minority apprentices, service-disabled veterans. I went to an outreach program Thursday, and there'll be another one next week. We believe in doing the right thing, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to have a 30-year career in construction. Before I opened my business 5 years ago, I was a safety and risk management consultant for 3 large contractors based out of Rochester. However, one was a national contractor as well, so I was responsible for labor in 12 different states. So I feel I have somewhat of a history. And I've worked with these gentlemen. I've been participant in the AGC Safety Committee as well as other groups. I'm a member of the National Safety Society, and we have known and recognized for many years that construction is a risky business. There is no question of it. However, since 150 years ago, we have evolved dramatically. The safety, the technology, the things put in place, OSHA, loss control. We know that our employees are our assets. Without our employees, we cannot survive or thrive. Unfortunately for me, as being a small woman-owned business, I have not been able to evolve into a large premium capacity. And with the results of the 240, the Scaffold Law, without being able to defend myself or my position, I'm eliminated the opportunity from obtaining insurance. I've been in business, this is my 6th year. I've never had a general liability accident. I'm very proud to say my comp record is impeccable. However, the insurance carriers realize and recognize as a masonry contractor with the Scaffold Law that I'm a risk to them regardless. And they looked at my equipment list this year, and they saw a scaffold on it, 6-foot Baker scaffold. And I have been to 5 carriers so far. I'm on an extension, and in 17 business days, SRS will be out of business. I will close my doors if I don't have the coverage. 30 people will lose their jobs. Veterans and minorities and women who are not given opportunities in other companies will be on the streets looking for work. And it is a direct result of the inability of myself and my carriers to bring up comparative negligence during a 240 claim. And I think I bring a little bit more to this other than my personal story right now, which may seem somewhat selfish, but I've been doing this for 30 years. I've represented some of the largest contractors in the state. And I can tell you my primary focus was the litigation, and it was the safety, and it was ensuring that when people come to work, they leave in the same condition as they return. We knew this was going to happen. We knew it was going to be a crisis. We understand that the insurance carriers cannot take on the risk for a premium that will never cover the losses. From a moral perspective, I can tell you that I've participated in probably 15 Scaffold Law cases, personally, providing testimony and or defending them. And it's very, very difficult for me to comprehend that culpability is not brought into play when an employee doesn't follow the rules, doesn't utilize the equipment that's provided to them, or maybe exaggerate some of the claim position, that never can go. The only opportunity that I've had in defending these claims is the amount of damages. One of the things that I don't hear too often, I think it's very, very important, this law was enacted, as I said, before OSHA, but it was also before workers' compensation. And workers' compensation was put in place to be a sole remedy when an injured worker needs to recover. My greatest reward is if people are injured, regardless of the seriousness, regardless of how it happened, is to work with them, provide management, and bring them back into the work environment with their peers and utilizing their skills and their trade that we need in this industry. That's been taken away from me in these claims. And it's taken away from the people who actually are injured, because many times they could come back to work. They could take a revised position. And eliminating the opportunity to bring this forward is an injustice. It's an injustice to society, it's an injustice to New York State, and right now, it is a very personal injustice to me, because as a minority, woman-owned business that is providing jobs in this state, I have 17 days, I'm on an extension now, and if I don't have insurance coverage, it has nothing to do with my performance or capability. It has to do that we can't get a bill for reform out on the floor to be voted on by our legislatures that we entrusted to protect everyone's rights and everyone's needs. I've been on the phone with Lieutenant Governor Duffy. He's working diligently with me, trying to come up with something, an alternative. What can we do? The clock is ticking, and I know he's very sympathetic to it. I don't know what it takes. I've been lobbying here for over 20 years. I've been lobbying for the cause because I believe in it. Now I'm lobbying for me. Please convince the legislators that this bill needs to go to the floor and it needs to be voted on for the rights of everyone. Thank you. And there's clearly a definition between downstate and upstate, but we're all New Yorkers. We all want to survive. I think from my perspective and being an upstate, and I've been involved with the unions, again, my entire career, and I think a lot of it's education, a lot of it's perception. You know, we put out there that, you know, insurance carriers are becoming rich and rich contractors are getting richer. I can't attest to that. I don't have enough time to be there. But I can attest to the fact that labor union members are losing jobs. And I can attest to the fact that out-of-state contractors are coming in. They can get insurance. They have a better market. They have a better value in the states they're in. And they can come into New York, and I've had it happen to me 3 times in 1 year, that the contract that I was qualified to do as a specialty contractor being certified by the American Concrete Association, a company from another state was more competitive. Their pricing is now competitive. So I think not only is this forcing people out of business, but now the whole economy is going to suffer when you have out-of-state workers come in, and I have nothing, it's not competition, but when they can perform cheaper and they come in and perform the job and leave, they don't support our tax base here. They don't support our schools. They don't support our housing. And I think the educational process, it's like a self-fulfilled prophecy. We've talked about this for years, and everybody said, oh, it'll never happen. It'll never happen. It's happening. Union workers aren't getting jobs. Local workers are not getting jobs. Out-of-state workers are being brought in to perform the same jobs that we're capable of doing in this state because their overhead costs are lower. But beyond that, they have a larger capacity for market. When we're down to 4 or 5 carriers that would entertain a commercial contractor, and you know the risk isn't worth the reward for them, we have nowhere to turn. It was suggested that I move my business out of state. Well, I'm a lifelong resident of New York. I've never left Monroe County. It's my home. It's where my children are, my grandchildren. And I have 17 days to start a business in another state before I lose my investment, my house that I had to mortgage last year to pay for my insurance coverage because it doubled, almost tripled, and my retirement that I invested in the business. And I'm not the only one. I was on the phone with contractors today driving up here. We've got our whole lives invested in this business. We don't get the golden egg. We need help, we need reform, and we need an equal and level playing field. And I know the governor's listening. I know Lieutenant Governor's listening. I hope there's enough time for me to survive it. But if not, I'm not going to stop. Because this is a right that is a resident of New York State that I should have my day in court. This law was enacted as a punishment to employers for not doing the right thing 150 years ago, right around the time Susan B. Anthony was trying to get the right to vote for women. I'm following the same path. I'm trying to get the right to vote for my existence, to have legislators that are responsible for the rights and the rules and the people of this state to do the right thing and put it on the floor. So in answer to your question, I am long-winded. The unions get it now, but is it too little, too late? When is everybody going to get it? When is everybody going to understand that fire departments have to be built? The roads and bridges need to be maintained. I had to give up 30% of my business last year. I worked on the Irondequoit Bay Bridge without an incident, an accident, or a first aid. And in order for me to stay insured last year, I had to commit that I would never work on a bridge again. And that's harmed me. I worked on that bridge in 2011, and it still haunts me to this date. Our bridges and our roads, I can't work on them. What are we going to do? Hospitals, schools, the modernization plan. We are spending billions of dollars in this state to make it better for business. We're inviting businesses from other states and other countries into New York State because we have so much to offer. How are we going to offer that if contractors can't get insurance, or it's so unaffordable that the prices of construction skyrocket? How is that helping us? I just don't get it.
I think you bring up a good point too, because we, as you said, we've all been fighting scaffold law for decades, and the state of New York is spending millions of dollars on advertising and trying to attract business to come to New York at the best tax status you can get, 0, whereas businesses that are here that we should be championing are being forced to close because we can't get an equitable, sensible reform. Not repeal, just sensible reform. Even playing field so she can go and have her day in court, as can the employee. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, okay, to strategy. I mean, does it seem like the governor, with his statements to Cranes, I think it was last week, seems to have effectively thrown in the towel on reform this year? Would anybody disagree with that assessment of what the governor said?
I think that we're about to enter silly season, and a lot of people like to use fancy buzzwords like mandate relief, small business, things like that. I tell our members that we're going to be hearing about that all the time, that the governor should understand that there's 6 weeks left of session. Lawmakers should understand there's 6 weeks left of session. Just because it's an election year doesn't mean we close the door and say, we're not going to do anything controversial. Because I assure you that our members, and I'm sure other organizations' members, are going to know and not be willing to be a soundbite. That they're not going to hear, hey, we're for small business, we're for minority and women-owned business, yet they're closing because we can't get scaffold reform. We're not going to say, oh, it needs to be down to next year. And I think that part of our strategy is, if lawmakers or the governor feels that way, is we're going to then educate our respective memberships on what reality is here in Albany.
And I would say to that, Casey, that I viewed the governor's comment to Cranes as more of a political statement than a statement on the merits of the policy here.
Oh, sure, but
either
way, it seemed to be an acknowledgement of the reality that according to him, and I don't think I'm mischaracterizing it, that it wasn't gonna, that it was I think.
Dead issue.
Yeah, right, a dead issue. I think that was the phrase he used, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
that's-
you know, when you deal with people like Mary Ellen every day, you don't have the luxury of thinking that way for us. I mean, this is an issue of survival for our members, their businesses. You know, you've heard Reverend DeGroff, my partner in this effort, talk about how it's an issue of survival for the MWBE community, particularly in the city. This is not an optional reform, and it is a very real crisis, and there are very real timelines, and for the New York City School Construction Authority, that deadline is December 31st. You know, you're familiar with what happened to them last year. They went from paying $100 million a year for insurance that would have cost them $25 million in Jersey City, which meant that they built 2 or 3 new schools less from the ground up when you still have kids in New York City going to school in rat-infested trailers, okay? Last year, the deal they were able to get, the only deal, so it's not just a small firm like Mary Ellen that's having this problem, that they got was $240 million for 1 year of not really coverage. They're basically paying their own claims. That's all they could get. And you do the math on how many fewer schools that is when you're paying $240 million versus $100 million, at the same time that you've got a mayor who's driving towards universal pre-K. You got to put those kids somewhere. They don't just go to class on the sidewalk. They need schools. They need classrooms. So that's something that is real, that happens on December 31st. And if there is not some sort of relief, I don't know what the School Construction Authority is going to do about that. There are 600 MWBE contractors whose business relies upon their ability to participate in that insurance program that the SCA has. I have had general contractor members of mine, so not small subcontractors, general contractor members who are generational family businesses, who last year, when the SCA told their 2,000 or so pre-qualified contractors that they feared they might lose their insurance last year because of the Scaffold Law, and I think you may have seen the letter, they put this in writing. I mean, this is unprecedented. They said, go talk to your brokers, much like the exercise that unfortunately Mary Ellen is going through. I had members that are general contractors told by the brokers that the response from the carriers was no way, we don't want it. So if that's happening to established general contractors, you can just imagine what the experience of smaller MWBE firms is going to be. Bye-bye, they're going to be out of business, 600 of them. That's a real crisis, and that is it's not a talking point, it's not a line of argument, it's reality. The SCA has been pretty clear about that. So look, I appreciate the politics of this aren't easy. If they were, frankly, somebody would have figured this out long before the three of us started doing what we were doing, and long before it became a big problem for Mary Ellen and hundreds of other businesses like her who have done nothing wrong other than trying to be in this industry in New York. I guess maybe that is something wrong. You know, it is a politically challenging thing. This is why. This is why. What you're going to see in Albany today with the trial lawyers fanning around Albany talking about this, and frankly, let me be clear, saying things about this law that are patently untrue. You hear all kinds of crazy stories around town about what this law is and isn't. What they're saying is just not true. It's not true how they're characterizing the law. And I get it. It's a very good deal for them. They win every case. They take a third of the money. They have to do very little work. Very little work. If I were a trial lawyer, I'd probably think this was a pretty good deal too. But I'm not, okay? So the politics are tough. I think the governor's acknowledging that. The fact that in that same story you have the Division of Budget on record saying that they were trying to find a way to do this year in the budget, I think sends an even stronger signal than the governor's comments, I think, in response to your question.
But that's like saying that everybody ought to get a pretty pony, you know, saying, well, we tried to do it in the budget. You know, that's...
Well, who else has tried to do that, though? I mean, I think the bottom line is the governor gets it. I think the governor agrees with us on the substance of this issue. I think he recognizes that this is a crisis. I think it's about the politics of getting it done. And that, frankly, that kind of falls to us. I mean, we're out there making that case. We're making the case on substance. By the way, there's no argument on substance. I mean, unless you, other than the fact that we have to respond to things that are just made up out of the whole cloth.
You mentioned Mayor de Blasio. He has just put forward an ambitious plan for public housing.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be a real problem for him because of this. Yeah, I mean, you know, look, anything that you want to do in New York means you're going to build. Whether you want to rebuild infrastructure, whether you want to improve education, whether you want to improve public health, whatever you're going to do requires you to build. And when building in New York costs a lot more than any place else, that's a problem. Then when you get to the point when you can't insure construction activity in New York, that's a real big problem. So for the mayor's affordable housing goals, laudable as they are, he's going to be building less affordable housing than he would if you didn't have the Scaffold Law. He's building fewer classrooms. He's repairing fewer roads and bridges, as is the governor. You know, the cost just to the state capital spending for 1 year of this law is $1 billion of money that is being siphoned out of already scarce capital funds to pay for excess insurance costs because of this law. That's $1 billion that we could be spending on roads and bridges and everything else. It would create about 28,000 jobs. So, the mayor should be joining this effort as well. And, I think the governor's there on substance. I think it's the politics that's a challenge, and that's the case we're trying to make.
Just in closing for me, I have 2 contracts sitting on my desk that I'm supposed to return to the state of New York, over $1 million worth of work that I was a low bidder on. I'm capable of performing, and I haven't been able to return them yet, because when I return them, I have to support it with a surety that indicates that I will perform regardless. And if I don't perform, if I don't get this insurance, I am in violation of multiple contracts. I'm going to get a little bit farther. I'm not only going to shut my doors and people aren't only going to lose their jobs. I'm going to lose my home, my retirement that I invested, my credit, the equipment that I've purchased, the resources that I've put together for the last 30 years of my career to do this. I have a 14-year-old son that I have to put through college. I don't care about politics. Enough is enough. Nobody should get the golden egg based on someone else's misfortune. And I want the opportunity in any environment to be treated fairly, equitably, and like every other individual in this state, in this nation. This is a violation of my rights. The message I get is the trial bar is more important than I am. It's aristocratic. There's no doubt about it. Why are their needs, their wants, and their alleged consideration and concern about my workers? Do they know their names? Do they know their families? Do they babysit for their kids? No. You can say whatever you want to say. I've lived this for 30 years.